What happens when America's sweetheart meets Hollywood royalty turned actual royalty, and the gloves come off on live television? Today we're diving into one of the most explosive daytime TV moments ever captured, where Kelly Clarkson absolutely destroyed Meghan Markle in an interview that had viewers picking their jaws up off the floor. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really went down here, because this is going to blow your mind. The Kelly Clarkson Show was supposed to be a friendly chat, a feel-good moment where Meghan could share her latest projects and maybe drop some royal tea. Instead, what unfolded was a masterclass in how quickly things can go sideways when two strong personalities clash. Kelly, known for her warm interviewing style and genuine curiosity, had prepared what she thought would be standard questions. Meghan arrived with her own agenda, and from the moment she sat down, the energy in that studio was electric in all the wrong ways. "So, Meghan, let's start with something fun," Kelly began, her trademark smile bright as ever. "I have to ask about your recent cookbook project. You've talked about how cooking brings people together, but I'm curious about something. You grew up in Los Angeles, had this amazing career, traveled the world, and yet in several interviews, you've mentioned feeling isolated and not knowing much about royal protocol. Help me understand that, because from the outside, it seems like you were pretty worldly before joining the royal family." The question seemed innocent enough, but Meghan's posture immediately stiffened. Her media training kicked in as she shifted in her chair, that practiced smile appearing. "Well, Kelly, I think there's a difference between being worldly and understanding the intricacies of a 1,000-year-old institution. No amount of travel or career success can prepare you for that level of tradition and expectation." Kelly nodded, but her expression showed she wasn't entirely buying it. "I get that, I really do. But you were on Suits for 7 seasons. You've done humanitarian work, you had your lifestyle blog, you were interviewing people, attending events, working with publicists and agents. Surely some of those skills transferred over. I mean, knew how to work a room, how to handle media attention." "It's completely different," Meghan replied, her voice taking on a slightly defensive edge. "Being on a television set is nothing like representing the crown. The expectations, the scrutiny, the protocols, it's incomparable." Kelly leaned forward slightly, her journalist instincts kicking in. "But Meghan, and I'm asking this with genuine curiosity, not trying to be difficult here, but you did quite a bit of research before marrying Harry, right? I mean, this wasn't a surprise Vegas wedding. You had time to prepare. You had people to guide you." The studio audience was dead silent now, sensing the shift in energy. Meghan's smile became more forced. "Kelly, I think you're oversimplifying. What it means to marry into the British royal family? No amount of research can prepare you for the reality of that life." "I'm not trying to oversimplify anything," Kelly responded, her tone still friendly but with a hint of steel underneath. "I'm just trying to understand the narrative, because in one breath you talk about being this independent, successful woman who traveled the world and built her own career. But then, when it comes to royal life, suddenly you're presented as someone who is completely unprepared and naive. Which version is the real Meghan?" You could feel the tension crackling through the television screen. Meghan's media training was telling her to deflect, but Kelly's question had hit something deeper. "I think you're creating a false dichotomy. There, Kelly, a person can be successful in one area and still be unprepared for something completely different." "Absolutely," Kelly agreed quickly. "But here's what I'm struggling with, and maybe you can help me out. You've talked about feeling silenced, about not having a voice in the royal family, but you had multiple platforms before your marriage. You had your blog, your social media, your acting platform. You were quite vocal about social issues, politics, feminism. So when you say you didn't have a voice, do you mean you didn't have the specific voice you wanted to have?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Meghan's composure was starting to crack just slightly. "I think there's a difference between having a platform and having agency. Kelly, when you're representing an institution, your personal voice becomes secondary." Kelly's eyebrows raised almost imperceptibly. "But you knew that going in, right? I mean, that's pretty fundamental to what it means to be a working royal. It's not like that was hidden information. Knowing something intellectually and living, it are two different things," Meghan shot back, her voice rising just a fraction. "Of course they are," Kelly said smoothly. "But Meghan, you're a smart woman. You're articulate, you're media savvy, you've navigated Hollywood, which isn't exactly known for its kindness to women. Are you telling me that you didn't fully grasp what you were signing up for? The audience was riveted now. This wasn't the softball interview anyone had expected. Meghan shifted again, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. I think you're being quite reductive about what it means to join the royal family. Kelly paused for just a moment, letting that comment settle. When she spoke again, her voice was calm but pointed. Meghan, I'm not trying to be reductive. I'm trying to understand your story because it keeps changing. In some interviews, you're the sophisticated actress who knew exactly what she wanted. In others, you're the naive American who had no idea what she was getting into. I'm just asking which one is true, or if maybe it's more complicated than either of those narratives. The camera caught Meghan's jaw tightening slightly. I think you're oversimplifying a very complex situation, and frankly, I'm a little surprised by the tone of these questions. Kelly's smile never wavered, but her eyes sharpened. I'm sorry if you feel the tone is off. I'm genuinely trying to understand your perspective. But when someone's story has as many variations as yours seems to have, it's natural to ask for clarity, variations. Meghan's voice was getting cooler by the second. Well, yes, Kelly said, pulling out some notes. In your engagement interview, you talked about how Harry had to explain who he was because you didn't really follow the royal family. But then later, you mentioned Googling him before your first date. In some interviews, you talk about being completely unprepared for royal life, but in others, you mention the research you did and the people who helped prepare you. I'm just trying to figure out which version of events is accurate. The studio was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. Meghan's media training was warring with her obvious irritation. I think context matters, Kelly, and I think you're taking things out of context. Kelly nodded thoughtfully. You might be right about that. So let's get some context. When you say you felt silenced, can you give me a specific example of something you wanted to say or do that you weren't allowed to? Meghan hesitated, clearly, not expecting such a direct follow-up. Well, there were many instances where I felt my voice wasn't being heard. Can you give me one specific example? Kelly pressed gently but firmly. I think the broader pattern is more important than any single incident, Meghan deflected. Kelly smiled, but it was the smile of someone who'd caught something important. But patterns are made up of specific incidents, right? If there was such a clear pattern of silencing, surely you can think of one concrete example to help us understand what you experienced. The tension in the room was palpable now. Meghan was clearly struggling with how to respond to Kelly's persistent but polite questioning. Every deflection was being met with another pointed follow-up, and the audience was watching what felt like a masterclass in interviewing technique. Meghan took a deep breath, clearly buying herself time to formulate a response. Kelly, I think you're approaching this from a very American perspective, and that's understandable, but the British system is different. It's more subtle. Kelly's head tilted slightly the way it does when she's processing something that doesn't quite add up. Okay, I can accept that cultural differences play a role, but Meghan, subtle or not, you're telling me that in all your time as a working royal, you can't think of one specific moment where you wanted to speak out about something and were told no. It wasn't always that direct, Meghan replied, but her voice lacked the conviction it had earlier. So it was more indirect pressure, Kelly asked, genuinely trying to understand, like you felt like you couldn't speak up about certain issues because of the position you held. Exactly, Meghan said, seeming relieved that Kelly was finally getting it. But Kelly wasn't done. So when you spoke out about voting, about women's rights, about social justice issues, that was you pushing against that pressure. Meghan nodded. Yes, those were important issues to me. Kelly paused, flipping through her notes. But Meghan, you spoke out about voting during the American election while you were still a working royal. You and Harry did that video encouraging Americans to vote. So clearly you did have a voice on issues that mattered to you. The color drained slightly from Meghan's face. That was different. How so? Kelly asked innocently. We were speaking generally about civic engagement, not endorsing specific candidates. Kelly's eyebrows raised. But it was widely interpreted as an endorsement of Biden over Trump. I mean, the timing, the language you used, it was pretty clear where you stood. And the palace didn't stop you from doing that. Meghan shifted uncomfortably. We were very careful about how we phrased things, right? But my point is, you did have a voice. You found a way to say what you wanted to say, even within the constraints of your position. So when you talk about being silenced, it sounds more like you had to be strategic about how you communicated, not that you were completely muzzled. The audience was watching this like a tennis match, heads turning back and forth between the two women. Meghan was clearly frustrated now. "I think you're missing the bigger picture, Kelly." "Then help me see it," Kelly said with genuine openness in her voice. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you had opportunities to speak out. You took them, and then when there were consequences or criticism, you framed it as being silenced. But isn't that just how public life works? You can say what you want, but you can't control how people react to it." Meghan's composure was cracking more visibly now. "The level of scrutiny and criticism I faced was unprecedented." Kelly leaned back in her chair, studying Meghan carefully. "Was it, though? I mean, Kate Middleton has been criticized for everything from her family background to her weight to her parenting. Diana faced absolutely brutal press coverage. Even the Queen has been criticized throughout her reign. What made your experience different?" "The racial component," Meghan said firmly. "Absolutely," Kelly agreed immediately, "and that's inexcusable. Any racist coverage or commentary is completely wrong, and I'm sorry you experienced that. But, Meghan, when you talk about feeling silenced or unsupported, are you talking specifically about the failure to address racist coverage, or are you talking about general criticism?" Meghan hesitated again. "Both. Okay, so let's separate those two things," Kelly said methodically. "The racist stuff, absolutely unacceptable, and the institution should have done more to protect you from that. But the general criticism, the stuff about your fashion choices, your public appearances, your family drama, isn't that just part of being a public figure? I mean, I get criticized for everything, from my weight to my parenting to my song choices. It comes with the territory." "It's not the same thing," Meghan insisted. "You're right, it's not exactly the same," Kelly acknowledged. "But help me understand why it's so different that it justifies some of the claims you've made." Meghan looked genuinely taken aback. "What claims?" Kelly consulted her notes again. "Well, for instance, you've talked about not being protected by the institution, but there were multiple occasions where the palace issued statements defending you, where they took legal action on your behalf, where they tried to set the record straight on stories. So when you say you weren't protected, what specifically do you mean?" "Those statements were often too little, too late," Meghan replied. "But they did happen," Kelly pressed. "So it's not that you weren't protected at all, it's that you weren't protected in the way you wanted to be protected, or as quickly as you wanted to be protected." "I think that's a distinction without a difference," Meghan said, her irritation showing more clearly now. Kelly shook her head. "I disagree. I think accuracy matters, especially when you're making serious allegations about an institution. Saying, 'You received no protection,' is very different from saying you didn't receive adequate protection." The audience was completely silent, sensing that this had moved beyond a typical celebrity interview into something much more serious. Meghan was clearly struggling to maintain her composure. "I think you're being unnecessarily pedantic." "Maybe I am," Kelly said with a slight smile. "But when someone's story has been as influential as yours has been, when it's shaped public opinion and damaged relationships, I think the details matter." "Don't you?" Meghan's eyes flashed. "Are you suggesting I've lied about my experiences?" Kelly's expression remained calm and professional. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking questions about inconsistencies in your public statements. That's what journalists do." "I thought this was a friendly chat about my projects," Meghan said, her voice tight. "It can be," Kelly replied smoothly. "But you brought up these topics, and I think my audience deserves to understand them better. You've made some pretty serious claims about racism, about being silenced, about lack of support. Those are important issues that affect how people view the royal family, how they view Britain, how they think about institutional racism. Don't you think those claims deserve scrutiny?" Meghan was visibly uncomfortable now, fidgeting with her jewelry. "I've been very clear about my experiences." "Have you, though?" Kelly asked gently. "Because, from my research, your story has evolved quite a bit over time. Details have changed, emphasis has shifted, new elements have been added. That's not necessarily wrong, but it does raise questions about reliability." "My story has remained consistent," Meghan said firmly. Kelly pulled out what appeared to be a tablet. "Would you like me to go through some of the variations? I've got quotes here from different interviews." The panic in Meghan's eyes was barely concealed now. I don't think that's necessary. Why not? Kelly asked innocently. If your story has been consistent, then comparing the different versions should just confirm that, right? Meghan was trapped, and everyone in that studio could feel it. The audience was on the edge of their seats, watching what had become a masterclass in how to politely but effectively challenge someone's narrative. Kelly had managed to maintain her warm, friendly demeanor, while systematically dismantling Meghan's carefully constructed victim story. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Kelly continued, her voice still warm, but with an undertone of steel that hadn't been there at the beginning of the interview. Meghan, I'm going to be direct with you because I think my audience deserves honesty. I've got 3 different versions of your story about when you first learned about royal protocol. In one interview, you said Harry explained everything beforehand. In another, you said you were thrown in without any preparation. In a third, you mentioned having extensive briefings, but said they didn't cover the emotional aspects. Which one is true? Meghan's face had gone pale, but her voice came out stronger than expected. Kelly, I think you're deliberately misinterpreting my words to create drama for your show. The accusation hung in the air like a bombshell. Kelly's eyebrows shot up, and for the first time in the interview, her professional mask slipped just slightly. Excuse me, this isn't journalism. It's a gotcha interview designed to humiliate me on live television. Kelly sat back in her chair, and anyone who knew her could see that Meghan had just made a massive tactical error. Meghan, I've asked you straightforward questions about statements you've made publicly. If asking for clarification on your own words feels like a gotcha interview to you, maybe the problem isn't with my questions. The problem is with your agenda, Meghan shot back. You clearly came into this with a predetermined narrative. Kelly's laugh was short and sharp. My predetermined narrative. Meghan, you've spent years crafting a narrative about being victimized by the royal family. And when someone asks you to back it up with specifics, you accuse them of having an agenda. That's rich. The gloves were completely off now. Meghan leaned forward, her voice rising. I shared my truth about experiencing racism and institutional neglect. And you're treating it like some kind of fictional story that needs fact-checking. Your truth, Kelly's voice was incredulous now. Meghan, truth isn't subjective. Either things happened or they didn't. Either you were given protocol training or you weren't. Either the palace issued statements defending you or they didn't. These aren't matters of opinion. You don't understand what it's like to be a black woman in that institution, Meghan said, playing what she clearly thought was her strongest card. Kelly's expression hardened. Don't you dare try to shut down legitimate questions by hiding behind identity politics. I'm asking you about factual inconsistencies in your public statements, not questioning your experience as a black woman. Those are 2 completely different things, and the fact that you're conflating them says everything I need to know about your credibility. The audience was dead silent, shocked by the complete breakdown of what was supposed to be a friendly chat. Meghan looked stunned that her usual deflection hadn't worked. I can't believe you're speaking to me this way. How am I speaking to you? Kelly asked, her voice dangerously calm. I'm asking you questions about things you've said publicly. If you can't handle being asked to clarify your own statements, maybe you shouldn't be giving interviews. Meghan stood up abruptly. I don't have to sit here and be attacked. Sit down, Kelly said firmly. Nobody's attacking you. I'm holding you accountable for your words, which is something that clearly doesn't happen to you very often. The command in Kelly's voice was unmistakable, and surprisingly, Meghan sat back down, though her face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. This is not what I agreed to. What you agreed to was an interview, Kelly replied evenly. Interviews involve questions. If you only want to do puff pieces where nobody challenges your narrative, maybe stick to friendly podcasts with your celebrity friends. Meghan's mouth opened and closed like a fish. I've been very honest about my experiences. Kelly leaned forward, her voice taking on a tone that would have made any experienced PR person run for the hills. Have you, though? Because honest people don't need multiple versions of the same story. Honest people don't deflect every direct question. Honest people don't accuse journalists of having agendas when asked to provide evidence for their claims. Don't have to prove anything to you, Meghan said, but her voice was shaking now. You're right, you don't, Kelly agreed. You can't claim institutional racism and then provide no specific examples. You can't say you were silenced while simultaneously conducting a worldwide media tour. You can't claim you were unprepared for royal life while also claiming you did extensive research. None of it adds up, Meghan. Meghan was clearly fighting back tears now, her carefully constructed image crumbling. In real time, "You don't know what I went through." "Then tell me," Kelly said, her voice softening slightly but remaining firm. "Give me one specific, verifiable example of institutional racism you experienced. Not general feelings, not interpretations, but a concrete incident where someone in the royal family or the palace staff treated you differently because of your race." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Meghan opened her mouth several times, but no words came out. Finally, she whispered, "There were conversations about Archie's skin color," with whom Kelly pressed immediately. "When? What exactly was said?" "I can't say," Meghan replied weakly. "Can't or won't?" Kelly asked pointedly. "If someone made racist comments about your child, that's a serious allegation that deserves to be addressed. But if you're going to make that claim publicly, you need to be willing to provide details that can be verified." Kelly's expression was skeptical. "More damage than making vague accusations that tar the entire institution." "Meghan, you can't have it both ways. You can't make explosive claims and then refuse to provide any evidence to support them." The studio was electric with tension. You could feel the audience holding their collective breath, waiting to see how this would end. Meghan looked around desperately, as if searching for an escape route that didn't exist. "I think we're done here," Meghan said finally, starting to remove her microphone. "We're done when I say we're done," Kelly replied calmly. "You came here to promote your projects and tell your story. Well, this is part of your story too. This is what happens when someone actually asks you hard questions. Instead of letting you control the narrative." Meghan froze, her hand still on her microphone. The power dynamic in the room had completely shifted, and everyone could feel it. Kelly Clarkson, America's sweetheart, had just systematically dismantled one of the most famous women in the world, and she'd done it with a smile on her face. "The truth is," Meghan Kelly continued, her voice returning to its earlier warmth, but with an edge that hadn't been there before, "you're not a victim. You're a privileged woman who made choices and didn't like the consequences. You married into one of the most famous families in the world and then acted surprised when it came with scrutiny. You left that family and then spent years trying to destroy their reputation when they wouldn't give you everything you wanted on your terms." The words hit like physical blows. Kelly's laugh was cold. What's not fair is using serious issues like racism as a shield to deflect legitimate criticism. What's not fair is damaging an institution and hurting real people because your feelings got hurt. What's not fair is lying to millions of people who trusted your story. And with that, Kelly turned to the camera, her professional smile back in place as if nothing had happened. "We'll be right back after this break." As the cameras cut away, you could see Meghan sitting there, completely broken, the carefully constructed facade finally shattered. Kelly Clarkson had done what no other interviewer